welcome to DevOps and Socks, and today I'm going to be talking about some of the new connector commands that we have, which you can use with Azure Container Service to spin out instances from your connector into Azure Container Instances. And I also have a special surprise. I have a little puppy with me who I'm babysitting, so he's going to say hi. Yoshi, you want to say hi? Okay, that was bad. I just made his hands go all the way up. He's very long. He's a very long oh, don't eat me. He's also teething, but I've been hanging out with this puppy for a very long time. There he is. Yoshi, you want to say hi? He's like, no, I want to bite you. He loves my hair. He thinks it's a big chew toy. And yeah, he's a couple months old. And we've been hanging out. He's so cute. You have anything to say? No? He's a concerned doggo. Oh, that's my wrist, love. Eat chew toy. Hi everyone, so today I'm going to talk about how to install your connector to your AKS cluster. So let me show you the documentation first so you know where to follow along, where you can follow along. So we have a bunch of different sections. The one is the prerequisite, so you'll need like an Azure account, you'll need to have the Azure CLI for this. The Kubernetes CLI, the Helm CLI. Helm actually can get installed directly into your Kubernetes cluster with a Helm in it. But if you do it the manual way, you'll need the Helm CLI. So that's important to note. I will not be showing you the manual way. I'll be showing you guys how to do it through Azure itself and on your own Azure Container Service cluster or AKS cluster rather than a cluster that's from a different provider or a Minikube cluster. So that's just something to note, that you can install the ACI connector onto any Kubernetes cluster. It's just that if you want to use our fancy AKS commands, you'll have to have an AKS cluster specifically. All right, so I'm running a 2-node cluster. You can see here I'm running version 1.7, something I should probably upgrade soon. And then I'm running 2 nodes in AKS. Alright, so to install the connector, I do AZ AKS. And actually before that, just note that if you have a fresh AKS cluster, you do need to do a Helm init just to make sure Helm's installed and configured on your cluster. So I already have it, so that's why it spit out this message. But the way we install the connector is through this AZ-AKS install connector command. And then you throw in the name of your AKS cluster. So mine is just literally AKS cluster, and I'm using tab complete because I always have better fingers, as you can see. So if you want to know how to set that up, just let me know. All right, and then I'm going to throw in my resource group. So these are for my AKS cluster. So I created my AKS cluster with this name and with this resource group. So I'm throwing that into this command. So it is going to create the connector technically in that resource group. And whenever you spin out pods, it's going to go directly into this resource group. And you'll see those instances in your resource group itself. All right, and then I'm going to say, all right, I'm going to throw in a connector name. This will be optional in the future. It's just right now it's not. So I'm going to call it my ACI connector. So remember that I'm using the Azure provider and I'm spinning out to ACI. And we've wrapped this command up with Helm. So this is pretty cool because I think this is one of our first commands in the Azure CLI that we've wrapped with Helm. And there we go. It's installed. Alright, so we can see that the Virtual Kubelet has been installed on my cluster through the connector. It's called my ACI connector, and it specifies what it is. It's a Linux connector. The reason we specify it is because we actually have a Windows flavor of this too. So if you want to install the Windows one, it's the same command. It's just at the end you add OS type and you say Windows. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and install it because why not? And it's going to go ahead and use, it's going to go ahead and use Helm again to install it, and there we go. All right, and there we go. So I have both my connectors installed on my cluster. I have a Windows one, I have a Linux one. So now anytime I decide to deploy a pod, I can deploy it to the nodes in my cluster, or if I want to deploy it into ACI, I deploy it to one of these, depending on what my workload is. So I'm in the Virtual Kubelet folder right now, and I'm in examples. So I'm in the repo, I'm in examples, and over here we have a couple examples. So you can get a nano server, you can get an Nginx pod or an IIS pod. So for my Linux one, I'm going to go ahead and deploy the Nginx pod, but before I do that, I'm going to cat out this to make sure it looks okay. So we do specify the amount of memory or CPU. Currently, we don't give it a default value, so you'll need to specify this, and this is the amount of resources that ACI will spin up as. So the container itself will have 1 gigabyte of memory and 1 CPU. And then we look down here, and this is another thing you guys need to keep in mind is the node name. So I need it to go to this node. So if I had a toleration on it, that's fine, except for the fact that I have 2 connectors. So my workloads may not be deployed to the right place. I do need to say that I want it to be on my Linux connector, and I have the name of it, and it should match the name up here. So Virtual Kubelet my ACI connector Linux, Virtual Kubelet my ACI Linux. So that looks all good, and you just need to deploy this the same way you would deploy any other pod. So I specify Nginx, and then that's it. So this should go ahead deploy into an ACI instance or a container instance in Azure. All right, so the pod was created, and that's it. It's going to go ahead and spit out everything that happened with it. And I'll show you guys in a second how I figured out what the name was in case you don't know. Okay, so down here is where the IP is. So I'm going to copy that. And this is the resource. This is our documentation for container instances. And I'm just going to find the IP, and there we go. So my container instance is up and running. It's actually manageable by Kubernetes. It looks like a Kubernetes pod. It acts like a Kubernetes pod, but it's actually not in my cluster, which is pretty great. So that's a Linux one. Now I'm going to show you how I actually queried for this. So I was just trying to get the pods, but let me just show you. So AZ container list, and then I throw it the resource group again. And then I can see all the different containers I have running in that resource group. All right. So there's that. And let's actually deploy a Windows example. So we have this nano server one. I'm going to cat this to see what's going on and see if we need to fix anything. I have my ACI connector win, which should be fine. All right. So I have all these different containers. We've created the default Nginx one and then the default Nano. So these two were created by the connector, which is pretty awesome. And they're right here. So if I want to click on it, it's waiting right now and in its creating stage. So that's fine. We see it at least. Another thing to note, you won't get logs inherently from this. So let me show you kubectl logs. It'll actually return an error, and that's because you need to pass a cert through. I won't go through how to do that right now. It is possible, it's just a little bit more of a manual process. We're also going to work on making that easier. But if you have an issue with your connector, the best thing to do is get logs from the connector pod itself. And then you can see what's going on, whether the image is failing to create, if it's failing to do whatever it needs to do, getting logs to the connector is the best way. So we see all the stuff here. This is what it does. It gets the credentials from this file, so it successfully found it. It created a Linux connector, and this is this pen data certificate input. So this is from the actual logs situation I was talking about earlier. You need to put this in. This won't affect your connector at all. Just don't worry about it. But pod was created, so that's great. But I hope you guys have a great rest of your days, and I hope you had fun hanging out with Yoshi. I look forward to making more videos in the future and hanging out with you guys. So use the connector commands. Let us know if you have any issues. Go to the Virtual Kubelet repo itself for any issues. We comment. We will do everything we can to get you up and running, and we'll also accept any PRs you want to give us. So yeah, for the benefit of the community. All right, cool. Thanks, guys.
Yoshi, you want to say hi? Yoshi. Hey, baby. Oh, no. Oh, no. Oh, no. Oh, no. Oh. Ooh.